The year 1992 marks a certain point in time in which action and adventure games arose from the ashes of text-based adventures or jump-and-run style games. In 1993, over 1 million copies sold. The famously known adventure Myst broke all records due to its photorealistic graphics. Action games released in the same year were still miles away from photorealistic graphics. Adventure games represented a mix of pre-rendered images and real actors, which was quite a big advantage action games couldn't compete against. Though the mechanics in action games increased a little, pixels were still too big and shapes were still looking much too static. In the year 1995, Phantasmagoria was released. It showed up a breathtaking story, great soundtrack, photorealistic graphics and real actors. Action games had poor support for using mouse back those times, but this changed with a game named Duke Nukem 3D. The time of 3DFX graphics cards began in 1996 and lasted for around 3 years. It enabled computers to visualize better graphics, but action games could still not reach the quality of graphics in adventure games, since textures and objects shown in action games were still cube-like and flat-looking, while adventure games had pre-rendered graphics in most cases and showed the best possible graphics even on old computers. Action games needed a lot of CPU speed and were still not even reaching the quality of adventure games. After the millennium, adventure games still had impressive graphics, while action games started to show eye-catching graphics too. Slowly, there were rounded-shaped objects, round-shaped terrain, and preciser textures visible. When there was one thing that action games still had to fight with, it was the staircase effect, which means that objects shown in action games were still not having smoothly shaped surfaces. In 2004, adventure games still showed up with great visual details, memorable musical themes, real actors, and novel-like stories. In the same year, action games made another jump and graphics without staircase effect were introduced. However, the system requirements for such action games were not common at that time and water effects were still too plain. In the following years, the graphics of action games showed more photorealism, while adventure games graphics showed up painted background. Sometimes painted backgrounds were even mixed with computer-generated graphics. The year 2007 marks the slow disappearance of high-quality and pre-rendered adventure games, since a new engine named Crytek shows stunning graphics. From that year on, every adventure and action game has to compete against the photorealistic look the engine can generate. Starting from 2012, adventure games get mixed with action game elements, while the same seems to happen vice versa with action games. Survival horror games start to replace the classic adventure. Many of those survival games had novel-like background stories, while the action-based elements were increasing. The same happened to action games. Their adventure and survival elements were increasing too. In the past it was much clearer. A game with lots of puzzles and eye-catching graphics belonged to the category adventure, while a game with lots of action and plain graphics belonged to the category action. Once, the category action-adventure was quite rare. Nowadays it seems to be the common type of game.